you will be surprised what kind of answers you get. And if you get deer in the headlights look from the interviewer, then they probably don't have an answer, and that tells you everything you need to know.
All right. Hello. Welcome back. Hired the podcast. I've missed this. Bryan, we took a little bit of a hiatus, and this is officially the first episode of Season 4 of Hired the Podcast. I'm Travis Miller, and with me today is Bryan Howard. Bryan's the CEO of Peoplyst and author of the Vanguard Edge. Bryan's got over 20 years of experience helping businesses solve the people problems that really stand in the way of their success. Bryan, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Thanks for having me as your first guest in Season 4.
Yeah, it's... Gotta shake the rust off a little bit, but I think we'll be good. So, Bryan, interesting. We were just talking before we hit record, and you just changed the name of your company to Peoplyst. Company's been around for over 3 years. Just changed the name, and you're telling me about how. It was a bit of a struggle for you. You had some challenges, but you made it through. And I thought that was such an interesting parallel to one of the things that you talk about in the book, which is the Vanguard curve, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, I guess it's similar in theory to the stages of grief, but how leaders and teams should react to any challenges or changes that they're facing. Tell me a little bit about your journey and what happened and how you dealt with it versus how a typical person might deal with it, where they're ticked off, they get angry, they try and bargain, and then finally at the very end they deign to accept.
Yes. So I got an opportunity to practice what I preach because we were called Mercury Performance Group. That's what the company was founded as a little over 3 years ago. And I filed a trademark because it's one of the things that you do in business. And that, after 8 months, solicited a cease and desist letter from a company also called, well, not exactly Mercury, but close enough, in Europe. So they sent me a cease and desist letter, filed an opposition to my trademark. And then at that point, I had a decision to make, of course. And in the Vanguard Edge, the book, which we'll talk about in a bit, we talk about the teams and how they become either resilient and adaptable, or they just basically break down under the challenges that the world gives them. And so there's a curve that's basically the stages of grief, as you mentioned. And one of the things that we teach in the Vanguard Edge is that there's a Vanguard resilience curve. Once you build up the competency of adaptability and resilience, you basically skip those first few steps of the grief curve, which are typically anger and sadness, and basically the need to just say, this isn't happening to me. This can't be real. This isn't happening. But that cease and desist letter was very real. And so here I got to practice what I preach, which was spending some time talking to my wife and then talking to the people in my business. I treat all of my employees like partners in my business. So I talked to each one of them, and we decided a new path forward would be to change a new name and rebrand. Even though that would come with some pain of its own, the quicker we got past the stages of grief, so to speak, as we preach in the Vanguard resilience curve, the faster we could get to starting our new future, which is now Peoplyst, as you mentioned. And our new logo, our new brand, basically the new attitude of the company has been very well received. And we thought we'd have a lot of issues with marketing and top of funnel recognition. But funny enough, people seem to be thinking that Peoplyst has been around for a while, even though we just made up that word as part of this effort. So we're real happy with our new brand and got to demonstrate what resilience looks like in the face of challenge.
I want to ask you about that philosophy of treating all of your employees, all of your team, like partners, and enlisting their help and enlisting their advice on big decisions like that. How do you ensure that when you do that, you're not alienating people by asking for their advice, asking for their input, and then basically saying, thanks, but I disagree, we're not going to go down that path.
Sure. And that does happen. And the other thing that happens too is, as with all polarization in the United States these days, sometimes you'll ask your people and half of them want to go one direction and half of them want to go the other. So just as important to have transparency in the problems that the company is facing and explain the why behind what's happening. It's also important to explain the why behind the decision that you made. Some leaders are bothered by that because they feel like, I shouldn't have to explain this. It's my decision to make. It's my company. I shouldn't have to explain it. In my view, however, I think it's important to explain it because not only does it help the employees and give them the transparency they need and the trust that they need in your company, but it also forces you to really solidify the reasoning behind your decision making in a way that you can describe it to others. They say one of the best ways to learn is to teach, and one of the best ways to ensure great decision making is to have to explain it a few times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to explain it in a way that people can understand it. We work a lot in engineering roles, and I've heard multiple leaders say that the mark of a great engineer is to be able to describe it so that a non-engineer can understand it. And if you can't do that, then you don't understand the product well enough yet. And I'd imagine a lot of that holds true to a lot of decisions made in leadership. If you can't explain the logic behind your decision and your choice in a way that somebody that's not in leadership can understand where you're coming from, then you haven't thought about it hard enough. You haven't put enough work into it, and you don't understand it well enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. When people find themselves defaulting to the parent answer, which is because I said so, then they probably haven't thought it through completely. And I hired all of my employees here because I value their thoughts and their skill and their ability to innovate. And so it's silly for me to hire people with that level of thinking and not engage them in the process as well. And this way, the decisions that we make happen with my employees instead of to my employees. So when we get to what would typically be change resistance, it just doesn't exist because they've been a part of it from the beginning.
So let's talk about the Vanguard Edge. I think the easiest place to start is, how'd you come up with that as a name for your book? What does that mean to you, the Vanguard Edge?
So a vanguard, by definition, is someone who is adaptable and resilient and at the forefront of things that are happening in the world. And so the Vanguard Edge seemed like a good name for me. It was born out of an assessment that we have in the book called the Mindset and Strength Evaluation Tool, or MSET, because that's a lot of words. And the MSET produces a result on a 4-quadrant matrix, and on one side of the quadrant is team strength, and on the other side of the quadrant is mindset, based on Carol Dweck's mindset idea of people either have a fixed or a growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Some people in between, but most people tend to be on one end or the other. And so for people that I wanted to build this team for, like a super team, they would be in the upper right-hand quadrant. And so that means they have a growth mindset and high team strength. And so then I was looking at these quadrants and I'm like, hey, I need some names for these quadrants. And so I started looking for what names make sense for these teams. And to give you an idea is a team with high team strength but a fixed mindset, fixed growth mindset would be called monoliths. And of course, you can see these 4 quadrants in the book. So then the idea behind this is if you get a perfect score on the MSET, you would score a 75-75, one for each quadrant, which would be the far right-hand corner of the Vanguard quadrant. And then you could count yourself as a perfect Vanguard team. And so then the book goes on to describe what a Vanguard team looks like and and then how to get from where you are today to that level of achievement by the end of the book. And it's a 6-step process that you go through to get there.
So I wanted to ask you about the assessment and the results in when you say perfect Vanguard team, because I took it myself, and I had our director of training and operations take it as well. And to be perfectly candid, Miller Resource Group, it's been a tough year. The market's been challenging. We've had some team struggles. It's certainly not a perfect year by any definition. And I think I'm an honest person. Especially when it comes to something like this, to look at my business and say, these are strengths and weaknesses. And we both took it, and we both scored in the Vanguard quadrant. And I was frankly a little surprised by that. So what does that mean to be a perfect team and score in the Vanguard quadrant? Because I'm reading your book, and there's still a lot of areas for growth in us. We are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. So what do you mean by that when you say you're a perfect Vanguard team?
So a perfect Vanguard team would mean that you scored a 75 on team strength and a 75 on growth mindset, which would be highly unlikely. But you could also score almost half of that, right? Because it's 4 quadrants. So you could score in the bottom, the lower left-hand corner of the Vanguard quadrant and still have quite a bit of room to grow in there. So, and we actually talk about that in the book. So if you have a relatively strong team, which I happen to know that you do, and then your team believes in growth and not just in we are who we are, we can't grow, which also doesn't sound like you or your team, then it's not surprising to me that you're somewhere in that Vanguard quadrant. And the journey is one trying to get to that 75-75, not necessarily just sneak into the quadrant at the bottom, at the bottom corner.
Got it. Well, that makes sense. And that makes me feel better that I still have plenty of room to grow, because you told me you took that assessment, you are perfect, Travis. You don't need to change anything. I'd be terrified.
No, it's really all about the score. It's interesting. We've had, as you can imagine, there's been thousands of copies of the book go out. We've had a lot of people take the assessment, and we've had people that scored really poorly on the assessment, and then we've had people that scored great. What we typically do when we work with intact teams, particularly higher, like C-suite level teams, is we average everybody's score from across the team, because it's really your view of what your team looks like. And so everybody has a little different perspective and opinion on what the team looks like. And so it's usually an average of those scores that gives us the best. Good to hear that both you and your other teammate scored similar.
Yeah. You probably got thousands of copies of the book out there. I'd imagine that most people that read the book end up taking the assessment, and even people that don't read it take it. Probably got some interesting data there.
Yeah, so far so good. What we find, generally speaking, is there are a lot of people with low team strength, but a growth mindset, which is a really interesting combination, because for them, the sky is the limit, right? They could really grow into something spectacular. And then for some older companies, we tend to see them in the monolith quadrant, which is the lower right-hand quadrant, where their team is really strong, but they just don't want to grow anymore. They're like, yeah, we're good.
They do what they do.
They do what they do. And so that's the type of place that says, yeah, that's because that's how we've always done it. Mm-hmm. Or that's not how we do it here. We hear a lot of that too. So yeah, it's been really interesting. What we don't see a lot of is people that score really high in the Vanguard quadrant, but we do find quite a few people that sneak into the bottom of it and have some fun with it. So it's good, and everybody has a different starting point. It's important to know, and that's the point of the assessment, is to know where you're starting from, so you don't end up working on things you don't necessarily have to. But the way the book is written, the 6 M's in the book, those will guide you to the promised land, no matter where you start from. And if you're already a Vanguard team, it will just make you stronger.
Yeah, I was curious about something with the 6 M's. The 6M framework is, and spoiler alert, for anybody that hasn't read the book, those 6 frameworks are mindset, mission, model, messaging, metrics, and multipliers. And as I kind of uncovered it as I was reading the book, but when I first saw the list, I was curious why mindset, not mission, was first.
So a lot of people ask me that. It's really funny when I talk about mission. I think mindset is more important because people have to be in the right frame of mind before they can start on any journey. And so for me, it's about finding people that have a growth mindset and then saying, okay, this is our mission. Because if you do it the other way around, then you may end up with the wrong people on your team, which is the start of that. And 2, they may not believe in the mission if it doesn't fit their current skill set, right? Mm-hmm. So if you find somebody that has a fixed mindset and you say, our mission is to complete X, Y, and Z by, ABC, then they don't necessarily get on board with it because it doesn't fit their current skill set. So I like to start with mindset first and help people get there if they're not already there, or in some instances, help those people find employment elsewhere and get new people on the bus that can adopt the mission, and then start the mission and the model piece.
No, that makes sense. I think about the journey. I think about Manifest Destiny. You had the settlers that you had to have that adventurous entrepreneurial mindset and spirit before you made the decision to trek across the country out to Oregon without knowing what was out there. Mm-hmm. If somebody was a banker in New York and liked what they were doing and comfortable there, they could say, I want to go west, young man, but they probably wouldn't have made it.
Right. And probably wouldn't have wanted to either. And that's not something you want to discover halfway across the tundra to Oregon. You want to know that before you leave.
Yeah. So is doing something like this, maybe these are 2 separate questions, but is it best and is it easiest to do for people and leaders and organizations that are just starting in the midst of change or well on the way to an established journey to turn inward and assess this stuff?
So really the answer is all 3, which is, I know you were asking me an or question, but the answer is really all 3. So if you're just starting, this is an ideal blueprint for building your team from scratch. If you're in a period of change, this is a great tool or a great blueprint for deciding whether or not you have the right people on the team, shoring up the team if you don't, and then helping people select what they want to do based on the new path forward, which is great. And then if you're an already successful team, which some are, and you want to rise to that next level, then this is a great way to take inventory of what you've done so far and see what small tweaks you can make to get to the next level. One of my favorite books ever written by Marshall Goldsmith is called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and he's the number 1 executive coach in the world. The accolades are very long. He's actually the first praise blurb in my book, and he is a firm believer in no matter how successful you've been to this point in your life, that there's something you could change that would take you to a new level. And so I feel the same way and feel like this book gives you some of those tenets that you could use to do that. That's a great book, by the way.
I've got it written down. Check it out next. How much of this do you do for yourself? Tell me a little bit about how do you take this and how do you implement these things on a regular basis at Peoplyst?
So it's sort of innate because I've been doing it so long. But when I say innate, I don't necessarily mean easy. I just mean it's part of who I am now. It's part of my DNA. So I do all of it, but it's not always an easy thing to do. So when I'm trying to implement a change, for example, I have to be very purposeful. And I described a little bit of the detail about how we went around doing the name change and doing the rebrand and how I involved my employees in that. And it was a big part of the model because we have a marketing team, we have salespeople, we have operations people that work in the business. And so it was a matter of going to each one of them, testing their resolve and their resilience, one, to see if they even wanted to do it. My sales team in particular was a real challenge because these are people who have been working with a brand and now they have to work with a brand new brand. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, the people that we have on the team decided to come along with us, as did our marketing company. But they could have very, very easily opted out had we not painted the vision and gave a solid path forward for them. And then of course, the model, which the model part of this is all about having the right people in the right seat on the bus, to use HP's vernacular. But yeah, so for me, it's about really just having the right people in the right place to make those decisions and implement them. And then, so that's what I do as a company. It's painful sometimes, but it's well worth the effort.
Did you have anybody who chose not to join you on the Peoplyst journey, or were there other situations where you followed the same model that you chose, or you helped them choose that wasn't the path for them?
Yes. So since everybody that was with me decided to go the Peoplyst route and give it a try and, see how it goes. But leading up to that, while we were Mercury Performance Group, we had some partners fall off along the way where we decided to part ways because the partnership was not fruitful as we thought it might be at the beginning. And so certainly in the life of this business, we've had some partners that I'll say fell by the wayside. And certainly in my lifetime, I've had that happen many times. Some people I did a favor by helping them move on because it was clear that what we were doing was not for them. So I think part of being a great leader is being brave enough to have conflict in a healthy way. And sometimes that conflict is just saying, I don't think you want to be here anymore. And I want to help you. I want to help you find something new. And they move on. It's really funny. I had a guy that worked for me many years ago, and he was great during the week. He worked at about 75% of the level of everybody else, though. And whenever I would talk to him, he was always tired. So one day I asked him, why are you tired all the time? I'm just curious, like family issues, something I can help with. And he said, well, if I'm being honest, I like to DJ. And so I do some DJ gigs at night sometimes, but definitely on the weekends, I spend all my time DJing. And so I fired him and told him to go be a DJ. And then he became one of the biggest mobile DJs in the state of Florida, which is great. And we're still friends to this day. But he just needed to push out the door to make him follow his dream. And so in my case, it was good for both of us to do exactly that. So sometimes bravery is helping people move along.
Mm-hmm. Boy, in my younger days, I went to some of those parties and some of those DJ sets. That's not a regular concert. I mean, those guys aren't going on until 2, 3 in the morning sometimes. I'd be tired too.
And then show up and work for me in the morning. It wasn't, didn't work out very well, but he's a great DJ.
No. I bet. So, and I guess that's don't take this the wrong way, Bryan, but it's kind of comforting for me to talk to somebody who runs an organization based on building great teams, helping companies to develop strategies for high performance cultures, bringing on great people, getting people on board with the mission, the vision, and all pulling in the same direction. And sometimes you uncover that no matter what you do, not everyone is going to be the right fit for the rest of time. Mm-hmm. And what do you do through your hiring practice to try to identify the people who are the best fit right now for their potential, their career, and for helping you and Peoplyst achieve your vision? What do you do different than other companies?
I don't know if I do anything different, so to speak. I ask a lot of questions, and I have good conversations. I don't believe, the old STAR interviewing method is great: situation, task, action, response, outcome, however you want to say it. It's a great way to have a conversation, but really what I want to know is how have you done your job in the past? And then what's even more important to me is, how did you measure success in your past jobs? Like, what did success look like to you? How did you know when you did a good job? How did your boss know when you did a good job? And I've been blessed. The size of our company, we're relatively small, so everybody that works here is close to the top. And so when I'm hiring people, I'm asking them not just to come in and be an employee, but to operate a department or a function within the business. And so I really need to know that they don't just have a good story to tell, but that they understand what metrics and KPIs are, and that they know what good looks like for the role I'm hiring for. Because I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades as an entrepreneur and business owner, but when it gets down into these functional areas, I'm hiring them to be experts as well. So I want them to know what that looks like. So for me, if you ask somebody how they do what they do and how they measure the success of it, and they can give you good, high quality, detailed answers, that's probably somebody you want on your team. And if they speak in vague generalities, that's somebody that hasn't led that function before in a meaningful way.
For me, I think, and maybe it's the industry we're in executive search, having to dig into companies, having to dig into people. But without a doubt, when I'm interviewing for us, I think the most important question, and I don't want to say above all, but I've seen this question spoil more interviews than any other question that I ever ask. And it's, what questions do you have?
Sure.
I can't tell you how many people. I'd like to think that I know sometimes it's a job. It's a job. But I think a lot of times, especially as leaders, we're hoping to find people who want a career, who want to be part of something bigger. As an entrepreneur, I mean, that's what we're hoping for, is to find people who can believe in our mission, believe in the vision, and want to be on the journey with us. And if that curiosity isn't there about what that really means and what their role is going to play in it, I like to think I do a pretty darn good job of explaining it, but I don't know everything they want to know. And if that curiosity is not there, that is so, so important. Is there anything else you think that I could do or we could do to help suss that out even better than that one very simple yet very complicated question?
Yeah, I think one of the important questions that one's always great. And my favorite answer is, no, you've pretty much answered everything I was thinking of, which we get that one a lot.
Yep.
And, but I think the other question is really like, what environment do you like to work in? And one of the reasons that's such a great question is because up until that point, if they've done some research on you, they may know what your culture is, anecdotally, at least from websites or reviews or those kinds of things. But when you ask people that question and they give you a direct answer, you get a little bit of insight into whether or not they'll fit into the company. And some people don't like full transparency, and I give that at this company. So if we have a bad month financially, I talk about it. That makes some people nervous, right? So if you ask people what type of environment they like to work in, what types of people do you like to work with, a lot of times they'll give you answers to questions that have nothing to do with their technical skills, but instead their ability to cope in your culture or in varying cultures. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an important one to add to your list as well.
Yeah, that's a great one, and something that a lot of times is more important than technical skills. I can teach a lot of the technical skills. I can teach a lot of the tactics in our business, but it's the things that I can't teach that are often the hardest to suss out in an interview.
Sure. And turnover's bad, but for that first 90-day turnover, and look, we're all human. We're not going to get hiring right all the time. As a matter of fact, if you're doing better than 50-50, I think you're doing pretty well. If you get into that 65%, 65-35, that's pretty amazing. But sometimes people will take a job, to your point, because they need a job, mm-hmm. They need a paycheck, and then you find out 30 days in or 45 days in that it's just not going to work. And that's very painful for everyone involved. And of course, very expensive for the companies that do that regularly. I know in your business, it's very expensive because you're selling that service. So you certainly don't want that 90 or 120 day turnover.
Yeah, that's really, really tough. Even in our business, the year and a half, 2 years turnover is really tough because people really, this is a business that more than a lot is about relationships. And people complain about hearing from a recruiter once and they'll never hear from them again. And they get so many freaking calls from recruiters. So it takes time to build that relationship, to continue to present value without selling anything again and again and again, so that when the timing is right, that recruiter is a known resource. They are a connection. They're a part of your network. They're a part of their community. And that takes time to build that level of trust. And mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that we really, really strive for and try and help our customers strive for. But yeah, we are also not perfect.
Yeah, nobody has a 1,000 batting average.
Mm-hmm. Your question mentioned asking people about the environments that they work best in. I think that's a very interesting question now, especially in this world where Spotify saying we trust our employees, they're adults, they can work wherever so long as the work's getting done. And you got Amazon, the biggest company in the world, saying, no, we need the team to be together. We do better work when we're together. I don't know if there's no right universal answer. And I don't know if there's even a right answer for each organization. There's one that's better, but how do you know it? And how does that change how you're coaching leaders to lead based on the environment that they're currently in? And how do you help them figure out the environment they should have in the future?
So as far as coaching for leaders in the environment that they're already in, I tell leaders all the time to make sure you're treating people the same way as much as possible. And we've written a bunch of blog articles about this. They're on our website. We've called them some fun things, but the idea around it is that a lot of employees are we call it trading pajamas for paychecks, and so there is a group of workers out there that will take less pay to have a remote role. They'd rather, and that's the joke about being in their pajamas than get a little bit larger paycheck. And so there is some of that. The other part that's a big part of it too is the chance encounter, the water cooler. I worked at a bank years ago, and one of my favorite things about the bank was I usually came in at about the same time as the CEO and the president, two different people. And often, once a week or so, I would ride the elevator up with one of them, and we would have a 30-second chat in the elevator. Well, if I'm not going into the office, there's no way that happens. And so that type of contact breeds familiarity. And the CEO certainly isn't going to seek me out on Zoom to have a 30-second conversation. That's just something that's going to happen as we run across each other. And so I found that very valuable, and it helped me in my career with that company as well, just because whenever I showed up somewhere, he always knew me and always knew me by name. So when people work from home, they give up that opportunity. So when I'm advising leaders, which was your original question, I tell leaders that they have to make those things happen. And so if you would have a 5-minute chat at the water cooler, then have a 5-minute chat over the phone and call people up randomly, schedule time between meetings, and make it feel as random as possible so that they feel like chance encounters to talk with each other. The other thing is you can facilitate similar conversations between other employees too. So today with social media or not social media, but Slack and Teams and Zoom chat, those kinds of things, you can start a group chat really easy, whether it be typing text or whether everybody hops on a quick call. You spend 5 minutes, you say, hey, what do you think about this? And one of my employees, Terrell, is in the office today, and I called him in and he came over and I said, I'm doing this diagnostic quiz that we're going to be posting online later today or tomorrow. And I just asked for his opinion. What do you think about these 3 paragraphs that are feedback from the quiz? And he read them real quick and told me what he thought and then went back to his office. And so you have to create those kinds of moments for your employees where you get to spend impromptu time together and then facilitate those conversations between the teams as well. It's very important because if you have hybrid teams, if you have some people in the office and some people remote, the people that are in the office have a distinct advantage over those that are remote. And as a leader, you have to be aware of that and find ways to try to level the playing field as much as possible. I mean, you can't fix it completely, but certainly you can help it along.
One last question for you here, Bryan. And we spent a lot of time talking about leadership and what leaders can do for their team. I do want to make sure that I ask, as people are searching for new organizations and new roles, what do you suggest? What are things that they can do to identify the leaders that have the most potential to help them advance and achieve the most out of their career that they want to?
So you asked a little while ago, what questions do you have for me?
Yeah.
And as far as leaders go, there's really two different people that you want as an employee on your side. You want a mentor and you want an advocate, and those aren't necessarily the same person. They might be, but they may not be. And so as you interview, one of my favorite questions to ask an interviewer when they say that question, right? What questions do you have for me? You can say, give me an example of a time when you acted as a mentor for one of your employees or an employee on another team. And you can also ask the same question and tell me about a time when you advocated for an employee and the advocacy resulted in a promotion. And ask that question. You will be surprised what kind of answers you get. And if you get deer in the headlights look from the interviewer, then they probably don't have an answer, and that tells you everything you need to know.
That is a great question to ask during an interview. I love that. Bryan, what else do you want people to know? What should they know about the book, about your company? What should they be reaching out to you for, and what would they get the most out of from you?
Sure. So we'll start with Peoplyst, my company, its new name. We help companies solve people problems of all types. So if you have a people problem right now, things like high turnover or low employee engagement or skill gaps, we can help you solve that. Then two, if you want to take the less direct route, obviously we talked about this, is you can grab a copy of the Vanguard Edge. You can get this on Amazon. It's currently on Kindle Unlimited if you want to get it for free and you're a Prime subscriber. Also, since you're listening to this podcast, if you just send me a note with hired podcast in the subject line, you can send it to Bryan, Bryan, Howard, Howard, at peoplyst.com. And I'll send you a free copy of the book. You don't even have to buy it.
I love it. How much you want me to promote that last segment of it? I could get you to give away 6 books. I might be able to get you to give away 60.
Yeah, 60's fine. 600's fine. I don't mind a bit.
All right. Bryan Howard, really appreciate it. This has been fantastic. I'm sad. I had all this questions to ask you about Lego. You got a bunch of stuff about Lego in your book. And I got my Lego typewriter back here that I didn't get to show off to you. But this has been fantastic. Really appreciate your time, your insight. Big thank you to Noah Cuff, our producer, and season 4 of Hired the Podcast is underway. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Travis.